Okay, we are ready to proceed. Our next speaker is Susan Hanley. Susan also has a lot of experience regarding Microsoft 365. She is a Microsoft Office Apps and Services MVP, and she is the key person when you want to know about adoption, information architecture, knowledge management, and governance in Office 365 and Microsoft 365. Susan, are you with us? So you're live, and you can kick off your presentation.
Great. So just a little bit about my home office. So my home office is also my home gym. And I was going to try and put a custom background. And I said, nah, if you really want to know me, this behind me is actually what you're not seeing is the laundry basket, because that's on my agenda today as well. But I already used my Peloton bike, and so showered and all that, so I could be here today. So thanks so much for having me. And I am going to do my best to share my screen and hope that it works. Oh, thank God. All right. So I'm no technical genius like Todd, so I'm going to try my best to talk through this. The slides for my presentation are available at this link below, spgov step by step. That link has been around for a really long time. It's really all about Microsoft 365. And so let me move into it because I want to spend most of my time doing a demo. So if I look the other way, it's because I'm trying to manage two monitors, a camera sitting off to my left, and yeah, I'm really here doing the best I can. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about governance for Teams and for the rest of the suite, and then I'll show you a little demo. So a typical governance plan kind of looks like this. It's a giant document that unfortunately no one reads. And, forget wants to read it. No one just does read it. And as a result, of course, a governance plan that no one reads is like not having a governance plan. So typical governance plan looks like this, makes you feel like this, maybe it makes you feel like this, and then the net result is the wild, wild west. And so particularly important in an environment where people are spinning up teams because they need to get work done. So if governance is going to be really effective, you've got to make it consumable. It's got to be something that people can connect to and relate to in their language and talking about the things they care about. And oh, by the way, it better not be a document because no one's going to read it. And so the things I've learned about doing this for a really long time, I think I've got the same number of years as Todd in the SharePoint land. I started working with SharePoint since before it had a name. It was codenamed Tahoe. And the net result of all of this is that even though I used to write governance documents, they always made me feel very guilty because they never really did anything because no one ever read them. And so the goal of governance really is to not necessarily give someone something that they have to read. The goal is to help them get business outcomes. And in order to be really effective, your governance plan has to be delivered to people when they need it, where they need it, and in a consumable format. So they don't need everything all at once. They need just what they need in the moment that they're trying to do something. So I think that governance alone isn't enough. So just thinking about governance for teams is not enough. And I really hate to subject myself to the Todd strangle over the airways move, but training Todd, really critically important. Strangle or not, training is the way, making people feel comfortable, actually. Let's forget the word training. The idea is to increase people's level of comfort with the technology that you're giving them. And that to me is training and adoption. And it doesn't feel like training if you give it to me in a way that I can consume it. And so my recommendation, my advice, the lessons I have learned in my many years of doing this is that the best way to deliver this kind of information, this guidance information, probably the most important part of governance, is to create a user resource center that people can consume in the moment that they need it. So we're a place where they can go to learn not just how to, but also how should, which means the content has to be oriented to them based on what they're allowed to do and what they want to do, and it needs to be very consumable. So today, I'm going to share my recipe for how to do that. Now, no one would ever actually ask me to cook food, but I can bake. And so I'm going to just suggest that you may want to adapt this recipe and do modifications to work. You got to do you. And so just like any good recipe, if you're working at high altitude or a glass pan or a metal pan, you have to adapt it. And so I'm not trying to tell you this is what you have to do, but I want to give you a model that will hopefully work. And I think when it comes to any application in the Microsoft suite, the goal is to understand what we need to govern and plan. So understand what we need to govern, create the content. And by the way, the gift I will give you with this presentation is some starter content for your governance plan, because I can't make all your decisions for you. There's a lot of different knobs and dials that you may or may not want to switch. Todd talked about them earlier. Some people may get superpowers. People may get less superpowers. You still have to make those decisions and create the content. I've often heard people ask me, well, if I knew what decisions I would need to make, I'd be able to make them. Great, I got your back there too, and I'll show you a link to a resource where all of those decisions are in one place and in a document format where you can actually write it down. So the idea is understand what you want to govern, create just enough to get business value, deliver it when and where people need it in a format that they can consume. In order to do that, you want to put a small team together to make these decisions. How big of a team? Well, if they can't eat lunch with 2 pizzas, then the team is too large. So you want to get right representation from IT, from business, from comms. So you really want to, because you don't want to make these decisions just from an IT perspective. So what are those decisions? I'm really going through this quickly, so I hope you guys are tracking questions for me. So 2 great resources for making those decisions. One is the one that I've been working on for the last 15 years, and I literally update this on a weekly basis because things change and I learn something. And so TinyCC SharePoint Gov questions, it's a little misleading because it's really Microsoft 365 governance questions, but I'm not changing the name because it's been downloaded 15,000 times and it's out there. I'm going to keep it, but trust me, it's more than that. And then Microsoft for Teams specifically has a governance resource center, teamwork/governance, and that is actually being updated as we speak. And I actually know that because I'm working on it. But all of the key decision points are also wrapped into my governance planning tool. And what that basically is, it's a sort of a meeting by meeting approach of how you can make these governance decisions, organized by the things you should be making first, decisions you should be making up front, and then decisions that you can let go as you reach further along in your journey for Microsoft 365. Specifically. And just to, again, reiterate, the most important decisions you're going to be making for Microsoft Teams are things like naming conventions. Boy, I have a lot of clients that wish they had made naming decisions, if they had made those naming decisions prior to having the floodgates open. So think about naming decisions. Think about, do we need to think about classification? Do we need to restrict things on a team by team basis? And do we want to allow, who is allowed to provision a team? Do we want to put IT in the middle of that, or someone or someone's in the middle of that? Or do we want to let anyone provision whatever they want? And honestly, I could argue both sides of the provisioning story. The right decision is the one that works for your organization. There's no right answer to these questions. So I'm going to now make a sacrifice to the demo gods and hope that I can show you something. Hopefully you are now seeing an example of my user resource center. So from a front door perspective, I'm going to jump right into the Teams part, but from a front door perspective, my assumption is that we're going to try to keep all of this content in one place, not just by application, because it turns out this Microsoft 365 family, they're pretty tight. You know, Teams, if you put a document in Teams, it actually lives in SharePoint. If you upload a document in a chat, it's going to live a one-to-one chat. It's going to live in your OneDrive. I mean, these guys, it's a tight-knit family, and they play really nicely together. And a lot of the guidance that we want to give people, it applies no matter where you are in the family space. So my front door is really all about, hey, I'm brand new to this. What does it mean? You know, is Microsoft 365 the upgrade from Microsoft 364? What is this all about? And the way I think about this world is from a what do you want to do perspective. And so I'm not going to click on that page right now. The idea is I want to present to people not here's the app, here's what it can do, because that's not how we think about our world. I want to say, what are you trying to do? Here's a good way to do it. So in the front door page, the assumption is you know something or you know nothing. If you know nothing, you're going to explore. But if you know something, you know either I am interested in, I want to upload a document. I have no idea how to do that. So I see these, I can explore by category. I can say, oh my God, I've never heard of this Microsoft Teams things. I want to learn what that's all about. Or holy cow, someone told me I'm in charge of a team. Or someone told me I own a SharePoint site in our intranet. What does that mean? And what did you sign me up for? So, for example, one way to explore is by role. And when I land on this page, so just to give you a sense of this, this is a communication site. Every single topic, unlike that giant document that you have to read through the whole thing, every single topic gets a page, one page. The pages are short. Why do I do that? Because that's what gets search to help. So the other way to explore this experience is I don't know anything, I want to navigate, I've been assigned a role, I want to learn about a topic, or I want to learn about an application. The other thing is help, I have no idea, I'm going to search. The best way to give people good search experiences is to have one topic per page, so that when I land on that page, I'm getting the answers that I want. So as an example, if I click on the site owner page, it pretty much tells me what my job is. You notice that there's a bunch of highlights here. That's because in one of the service offerings that I have as a consultant, I work with clients to make these decisions and then create a copy of this. In my tenant, we remove all the highlighting because these are the places where they have to make decisions. I deploy the entire site into their tenant. Anyways, that's not really what we're here to talk about. But while we're on this page, you can see that it's short, it's directed to the person who is reading the page, and I'm going to use what I'm going to call the Amazon.com recommendations engine. What I'm going to show you while you're on that page is, you're a site owner. You might also be interested in. And these are the other topics that are related to the site owner role. Let's go to probably the content that you care the most about. Let's talk about Microsoft Teams. All right, what the heck is it? How do I create it? Oh, you know, let me watch a video about it. So this is basically all the kind of content we need. And oh, by the way, want to get trained? Here's links to training. And want to know some other stuff about Microsoft Teams? I'll show you that too. Now, Todd mentioned something that I think is also important and that you can do. If you deploy the Microsoft Learning Pathways site to your tenant, you can take your how should content and wrap it into your Learning Pathways how to content. Because remember, all the content that you can get from Microsoft, they can tell you what decisions you can make and they can tell you how to do things. What they can't do is tell you how you should do those things inside your organization. But just as an example, if I were to flip over to my OneDrive page, here's an example of where I've embedded the how-to from Microsoft, from the Learning Pathways site. I've made a custom playlist. And one of the things, step one is to create a file and folder. But, before you do that in my organization, I want you to know about file naming practices. And here I have pulled in my file naming practices right into Learning Pathways. So Learning Pathways has it. I have it here, and I would do the same thing with Microsoft Teams as well, so that if you're going to tell someone how to create a team, or they're going to find it in the Learning Pathways site, or you have it on your resource center, all the training and the how should are all embedded in the same place. So let's look quickly at how you do this. How do I set this up? So I'm an information architect by training and profession, so I love metadata. Sorry, I love it. I think it's a great thing, and I'm going to use it to create these great user experiences. I know people hate metadata. In this case, you're going to love it. 4 pieces of metadata can create this entire experience. So the only thing I want to know is, what is the page about? Remember, 1 topic per page. You can call this whatever you want, subject, topic, it doesn't matter. Who is it for? Because I might want to say, hey, I'm a regular person. What do I need? I'm not a site owner. I don't have superpowers. What can I do? And what should I learn? I am a team owner. What do I need to know that's specific to my role? So what is it about? Who should be the most interested? What service is it related to? Because sometimes I may want to roll up content based on a service. So the reason I'm using this term roll up is that related content page is driven by my favorite web part in all of SharePoint, and that is highlighted content. Because highlighted content is what happened when the content query and the content search web part grew up and moved to the cloud. It is a way of pulling in authoritatively related content. Metadata allows you to tag a page, not just a document, and then connect related pages in that beautiful, wonderful web part. And then the last thing I do is I tag the content with, what kind of a page are you? And that way, if I have a page that describes Teams, I can say, hey, while you're learning about Teams, you might want to learn about Office 365. You might want to learn about SharePoint. So a page is either about a service or an application, it's just guidance, or it's about a role. And mostly those 3 pages, that tag allows me to tell different relationship stories in highlighted content. So let's take a look at exactly how that works. So this metadata, by the way, I use regular site columns. In the slide deck that you will get, you can see my internal mental debate about managed metadata, regular metadata, what's the best, what should I do? I've done it both ways. If I thought that what I was using as terms were critically important to the entire organization, and actually the service offering might be one of those, because when Flow changed to Power Automate, I had a lot of work I needed to do. And Office 365 is being more or less rebranded as Microsoft 365. I had a lot of work I needed to do. Might have been easier for me if I had used managed metadata in that instance, because then all of my pages would have retagged themselves. But for me, I am using regular site columns, although I think if I was making this decision today, I might choose managed metadata. But again, you can read how the pros and the cons, it doesn't matter. The net of all this is you can use any kind of column you want. Most of these are choice, actually they're all choice columns. I make some of them multi-select, actually all of them except topic. And the only reason topic is not multiple choice is because if I don't make it multiple choice, I cannot create this experience easily, which is the roll up by topic. So everything is multi-select except for this one thing. So let's go look at one of the pages. By the way, the slide deck is going to give you step-by-step instructions for how to create this. You can create this in less than an hour, the exact same framework. Putting the content in, that'll take a little longer, but in the deck, there is a zip file, an embedded zip file with 5 or 6 different pages of content, including one about giving people guidance about Teams chat. I think that's kind of something that's helpful best practice. I don't think that's really shared very often, so all that is in there as well. So let's look at sort of what this page has in it. Oops, I'm going to put the page in edit mode. And what you see here is, we can call this Sue's favorite web part. And this is highlighted content. All I want to do is pull in content that is tagged with what I'm choosing to create as a user experience on this page. So the source is the page library. It'll default to the pages as the type. And because I've created metadata, and again, I'm going to give you the Sue Hanley rule. All your metadata gets created at the root of the site collection, because then it can be used anywhere. I very rarely create list columns. So create your metadata at the root, that way you can use it everywhere. And then you need to add that metadata to the site pages library. And back in the way back, when communication sites were first launched, you couldn't do that in the site pages library very easily. But I promise you, you can. So you'll just, instead of adding them natively to the site pages library, you'll select use existing site columns, attach them to the site pages library. That way they'll be available to tag on every single page. And then you can do a page properties filter for the query that is most relevant for the page that you're on. So in this case, I want to show people, while you're on the page about teams, let me show you all the other content related to teamwork. So topic equals teamwork. I prefer the list view because I think it's the least annoying in this context. It shows it lets you show the most content, and every other view shows the name of the person who edited an image that in this case probably is less relevant. So you don't have a lot of flexibility about what you can see in highlighted content. That would make it Sue's ultimately favorite web part. But you can, if you stick it in a 1/3 column and use a list view, you can show the main event about each page. And I typically show about 15 items. If there's more than 15, see all is automatically generated. So sometimes I will customize that on an individual page. And once I do the magic on every page, publish it, and all of the related content shows up. I do, in my site collection, have a page template. So I'm not basically configuring a brand new highlighted content web part every single time. I obviously did not make a big enough sacrifice to the demo gods there. Okay, it finally worked. Okay, so that's basically what's in the site. I'm going to take a little breath and see if there are any questions about this.
So we have one question. Chris wants to know if we have a tenant where Wild West happened months ago. After trying to archive unused groups and sites, what would you recommend for renaming groups to fit into a convention? Are there any advices or tips you can give?
Oh, God. Don't ask me a hard question. This is early in the morning for me. So the challenge, of course, is when the cat is out of the bag, if you will, and you've already got, I mean, I guess it sort of depends. Renaming an Office 365 group, a team collaboration space, is actually a little bit dangerous, I think. Todd is still on the call. You might be able to chime in on this. It's really hard because what happens when you do a rename is that you get these redirects at the back end. And if you rename the site at the back end, the team is going to lose its connection. You'll have to manually remake all the document connections to the team front door. So you can, I would just say if people are working and they're getting their work done and no kittens are dying, you probably just want to live with where you are and correct going forward. You guys might disagree with that, but this is a challenging question. This is probably a good question for the SysKit guys. What do you guys think?
It is a hard question. I would agree on that one. I think the rename capabilities got better in recent, let's say, a year or so. So if you can identify all those that need to be renamed and rename them like in some sort of an organized way, that would be a good approach. The problem is some links might stop working. So if you're relying on a lot of sharing and stuff, that might stop working if you share it with the exact link. So be aware of that thing, because I think redirect, if it contains the actual URL, it's not going to work when you did the rename. That can be a problem.
I think it depends on the kind of site that you're renaming. Communication sites kind of they get renamed pretty easily. The problem is the complications with the Teams workspaces, because you're renaming the group and the site and the connections. And so when I've tried to do a site rename on a site connected to a team, it hasn't been a great outcome.
We don't have any questions right now, so
Okay, good.
we
All
can
right,
leave
so
it at the end. Okay.
Okay, cool. So so I'm going to just flip back again, another prayer to the demo gods. I'm going to flip back to my slides to just kind of show you. So this is basically the experience if I were to go to the User Resource Center in SharePoint. But if you're working in Teams, the idea would be, gosh, I'd really love to bring the User Resource Center into Teams. Wouldn't it be great if I could do that? So let me see if I can even make this happen by bringing us back. Okay, so just in case this demo didn't work, again, in the slide deck, you'll have all the screenshots from this. But the last step in this process is really to deliver the help that people need exactly where they need it, just in time. So if I were in SharePoint, I'm going to wire up the little help icon, the question mark in the upper right hand corner of the screen that honestly I never knew or was there until about 6 months ago. So I don't think a lot of people are getting their SharePoint help that way, or maybe a lot of people who think they know SharePoint aren't getting their help that way. But one thing you can do is that you can wire up your User Resource Center, which is a unique site collection in your tenant, to help. So if someone clicks help, your resources are there and available to them. The other thing you can and should do is make sure that you wire up a search bookmark to get your User Resource Center as a top result if someone is searching for Teams help or SharePoint help. And then the final thing that you can do, actually step 8 in the steps that you'll see when you look at the slide deck, is bring your Teams Resource Center right into Teams. So here's an example of working inside the Teams app and adding a tab that brings in the Resource Center right into Teams. So you can see in this screenshot, I can create all my governance content in SharePoint because I want this content to live as a page. So, and you can see pages have a rich experience. I can have images, I can embed videos, and I can do all of the things that I really want to do to tell great stories. And so I think training works the best when you can give people really good story information. And so I want to give people the context and the experience all in one place. But I also want to make sure they can get that information right when they need it, right where they're working. And so one really great way to do that is to bring your User Resource Center into the places where people are doing their work. And one of the really great ways to do that is to just add the User Resource Center as a tab in your Teams template and for every team that you create. And I think this is really how you take all the hard work you do to make your governance decisions and bring them to people when and where they need it in the context of where they work. So to kind of wrap up my key points, consumable content is not delivered in long documents. Don't write a governance document. It's not worth it. No one reads it. And I promise you, I've done it enough. Go ahead, try, but please, it's the kind of thing that really, it's been very painful for me to write a document that no one reads. It hurts. I think it's much better to deliver short snippets of information that are delivered in context where people need them. And if you can supplement the text with video, that's even better. I would be very careful about video only. My mission for the last 2 years has really been to think about accessibility as I'm creating content. Video works for people. If all of your video has transcripts, that's actually okay. But remember that not everyone is able to see and consume information with a video. And so actually not everybody, even if they have no disabilities, not everyone can play sounds in the workspace where they work. Well, maybe they can today, but they may not be able to when we're all allowed to go back to the office. So I think that in general, video is phenomenal as a way of learning. I learn a lot with video. However, I want you to think about your training, think about your entire audience as you're creating content in SharePoint. I'm going to get off that soapbox. Guide users to the content that they need by biting the bullet and adding metadata to every page. Use highlighted content to create those roll-ups, and then inside the content, you can also use hyperlinks to connect other pages in context. To keep your pages short, you don't want too much content on any individual page. And so hyperlinking to ancillary or related content is another great way to do it. Deliver the content in context wherever you possibly can. It's not enough just to have that site. You need to be able to get it to people when they need it. And actually, no one is going to find your training site, your learning site, if you do not promote it. And so there's a lot of work to create the site, the content. The site itself is going to create itself. It's very easy to create. But back to that T word that I know that Todd really doesn't want to hear, but you've got to supplement this with training. You have to direct people to the User Resource Center. So not only do you deliver it to them in Teams, make sure your help desk knows that it exists so that when someone does submit a ticket, you can, if the answer is available, you can use the help desk to promote the content as well. So just because you have it doesn't mean that anyone will find it. And so I think you really want to make sure that you do a lot of work to promote it. And if you can, to encourage people to follow best practices and your governance guidelines, especially when it comes to Microsoft Teams. If you're going to do training, train the entire team, no matter where they are geographically, together. Give them an opportunity to use that team training to come up with another kind of governance, which is really related to the team itself. Every team, whether implicit or explicit, has what I call a collaboration contract. It's how they decide how we want to work together. It's how we decide, hey, we don't want to send emails, please use team chat. It's how we decide the naming conventions for our channels. It's how we decide we are not emailing documents to one another with .v1, .final, .really final, .this time I mean it, _sh comments, that we agree as a team that all of our content is going to be stored in our file repository. We will only share links and we will all edit in place. No matter how much organizational governance you have in place, every team needs to make these kinds of decisions. One of the things that I find extremely helpful in training people is to use the training time, not just to show people how to do things, but also to get them to use this as an opportunity to talk about things like file naming conventions, where we want to store our content, what kind of channels we want to use together as part of our team. So we can combine the governance as a whole that we provide as an organization with the individual team governance that every team needs, these decisions that they need to make for themselves. Here's again a summary if anyone wants to screenshot all the different links of the things I've talked about and all the different ways that you can reach me. One other thing I want to make sure I share is I hope you will download this presentation. It's in native PowerPoint form because of this. So it tells you exactly how to create the metadata. There's a page in which I've actually literally listed all the metadata values, and I don't use bullets so that you can cut and paste. They're all alphabetized, by the way. Cut and paste them directly into your choice column, and you'll be able to use them. That's why I said you can really create this pretty quickly. And all the content that you're seeing here are Word documents that you can then add to your pages, are embedded in that little zip file that comes with the presentation. I think I'm in the time, right? Did I make it on time?
Yeah, you sure did. So we have a question regarding how to keep track if people are actually using the Resource Center or if the investment did not reach the goal.
Oh, that is a really great question. Well, you know, the Resource Center is a SharePoint site collection. So you set all the same data on your User Resource Center that you do on any site collection. So you can tag views, you can look at likes, If you want, you can open comments up on pages. I usually don't. That's because I'm not going to be in a position to reply to those comments. But what I will do on the home page of the User Resource Center in my client tenants, I will always embed the, what would I call them? The kind of the collaboration community, the champions community, Yammer group will almost always be embedded on the home page so that there's an opportunity for dialogue. And so you have all the same metadata or tracking data, analytics data that you have on any SharePoint site that you absolutely should be paying attention to, including which pages are adding the most value, because maybe they ought to be promoted in a different way, and then combine that with embedding a Q&A experience in Yammer, and I think you create a really great space for people to get help.
Okay. We have another one, which is like, I find this one very interesting, and I'm looking forward to hear your answer. Any tips and tricks how to keep the Resource Center up to date, since Microsoft changes things every day?
Welcome to my world. Thank you very much. There are a lot of places to keep on top of. If you download that governance questions document, I actually list all the places that I follow on a regular basis. I probably update my personal content because, again, I use this in my consulting practice. I'm updating it probably about at least twice a month, but I am getting updates every day by watching. I watch the roadmap. I have an RSS feed to the roadmap. I also have an RSS feed coming from the tech community. I follow every single blog. And as soon as I see something that sort of triggers my governance radar, I pop everything into a OneNote so that every weekend I can go and update all my content and my governance questions based on what happened in the previous week. It is a commitment. I will be honest with you. So there's no easy answer to this question. Here's what I would say. It takes a village. I usually tell my clients, you need to get a bunch of different people following different places and have a place where they can each record in a collaborative environment, maybe a team or a OneNote, where they can, as they see things, they can put them in a place where everybody else can see them. And then they come together on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to say, do we need to update our documentation? Do we need to do a communications? Does the User Resource Center need to be updated? Microsoft is pretty good in the other place I follow that I think is also really helpful is the Message Center. And when the Message Center, when there's an announcement where you may need to update your guidance, your documentation, there's almost always an indication like you may want to update your documentation. So that is another clue to me that we may have content that needs to be updated. I wish I had a better answer for this.
Out of the content, or where do you find what seems to be the best source for information these days? Where do you get more content that you should put into your resource centers and stuff like that? Do you have something that you could recommend on top of your head?
Sure. The two that I find that are the most helpful. So Twitter tells me when it's going to hit, because as soon as somebody sees something new, someone's going to tweet about it. So that's how I know what I better quickly update. For what's coming, my roadmap feed is really, really helpful, and the Microsoft blogs as well, because, and then the other one, the third thing that also is really helpful is at the end of every month, Mark Cashman's been great about putting together an intrazone podcast episode summarizing everything that's happened in the previous month. He focuses on SharePoint, but he also throws in Teams, and there's a end of month Teams blog as well. So Microsoft has been so much better recently at telegraphing what's happening and what's coming and what's happened, that it does. I mean, those are probably my favorite sources.
Okay. Thank you, Sue, for a very nice presentation. I'm sure there are many people downloading the information as we speak right now and trying to build their own research center. Thank you so much.